All right, welcome back to the training, and right now we're going to talk about my favorite rig out of this whole light kit so far is this SkyLight. And what it allows you to do is really put up a really quick way to light your scene and make it look really good without using global illumination, without using area lights, without using all the things that usually look good but take a long time to render. This SkyLight is a nice balance of a quick render and a nice look. So just by default, I'm just going to apply it, hit render, and see what we get. And by default, you're going to see the shadows are just kind of like a general soft shadow. We have some nice coloring going on. It's a little dark. Maybe we can use this first slider here, the SkyLight controls, and just kind of turn it up just to see it a little bit clearer. You can see we're getting a really pretty good look. Now, it's not perfect, and it's not a total replacement for global illumination or for area shadows, but for a lot of things, especially if you just have a quick little scene, if you just want a kind of a base place to work with, this SkyLight is a really, really nice way to get going. Now let's look at some of the other options that are included in the SkyLight to kind of adjust the look of it. You can see we already played with the brightness, which is kind of a no-brainer there. Make it brighter and dimmer. The light dome size and the light dome density we really don't have to worry too much about, but basically just know that this is all a light dome that is lighting our scene. Each of these little dots here is a separate light that is lighting our object from all different areas, and it's giving it this nice soft shadow look that always looks pretty good. The light dome density actually adds more lights to the dome and allows us to kind of give a smoother shadow look. And we'll play with this, I think, later once we start to play with some of the settings. I'll show you what's going on. So let's kind of leave it default. Let's crank it up. You usually don't have to mess with those too much, but that's basically what they do. Turn this back up. All right, so let's talk about how we can set this up in different ways. I'm just going to kind of adjust our angles so we can see our shadows a little bit better. The next option is the gradient. And this is a really, really important part of the SkyLight. And this is what controls the color of the lights that surround the object. So in fact, if we wanted, if we just kind of hide our plane, I'm just going to uncheck it here so we can see. You can see the gradient actually shows in the reflection as well. So down at the bottom is kind of this brown color here. And if we look up, we have our blue color in the sky. And it's also controlling the color of our light so that when we render, the bottom of our object is kind of reflecting more down toward the brown, and the top is reflecting more towards the blue. And in fact, if we make this really dramatic, we make it like, a dark orange and like, I don't know, bright magenta or whatever. You can see that the bottom reflections are being lit, not only being lit, but reflected towards the orange area, and the top is kind of toward the pink area. And this really can get you some really specific looks, especially if you kind of crank, the angles of things. You can start to get these really kind of interesting looks here. But this gradient, you can actually be as specific as you want with it. You don't need to just do two colors. I'm just going to rotate this back around. Go back to our SkyLight and our SkyLight controls. You can actually make it totally wacky, right? So you can make, let's say the bottom is like a dark gray, and then it ramps up to like somewhere in the middle is going to be, let's say, a light bluish, maybe more of like a dark bluish right in the middle. And then you can actually add a new slider here just by hitting Control and clicking on there. You can actually make new color sliders. I'm going to delete that one and just use this one. I'm going to make this one 100% white. Bam. Just like that. And I'm going to bring it really close to this other one and this other knot. And you're going to see what it does is it kind of gives like an overhead light reflection kind of thing. And if we hit render, you can actually see it. I'm going to just pick a new angle so you can see it a little bit better. You can see it's actually reflecting off the top. We get reflections here, we get reflections there. And if we brought like a sphere into the scene and added our kind of reflective material to it, you can actually really see what's going on when we hit render. It's actually giving off like kind of an overhead softbox look right in the skylight. And it's also lighting our scene from above as well. So just to kind of show you too, if you got rid of this blue one, so it just kind of went white to black and hit render, you're going to see our scene is actually only being lit by the top. If we look at our scene from the bottom, there's actually no lights hitting the bottom of our scene, only the top. And in fact, if we were to do the exact kind of opposite ring thing on the bottom, just have a little highlight of, I don't know, red on the bottom. So now you can see, if we look way down, there's this little ring of red. I'm just going to expand it a little bit. So we have a little ring of red, and then we have a big ring of white on the top. And we hit render, you're going to see not only shows up in the reflections, but there's also just a hint of red in the bottom here being lit. So you can really do some crazy looks. In fact, one I use a lot is kind of a black, the one we had earlier, black to blue, like a dark, like a darkish kind of blue color with just a highlight rim at the top. Get this nice little sexy highlight going on all your text and everything going on. So pretty cool, right? We could kind of crank the brightness up and see a little bit more of this. Now, the next setting is the shadow density. And this is really clear when we're using a plane. So I'm just going to turn our plane back on. And we're going to adjust our gradient because when you're using a plane, you're really not seeing anything below the halfway mark because the plane kind of covers it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to use, let's say like a green, like a light green at the base. And then all the way up in the sky, I'm going to have this white, but I'm going to add another little hinge and maybe make it blue. So let's just see what that looks like. Really a cool look. Green to blue with a little highlight. It's a little bright. I'm going to turn it down. But what we're looking at now are the shadows, okay? The shadow density kind of describes how dark the shadows are. So you can see now we kind of have some shadowing going on below the text and in between the lettering. But let's say we either wanted to make that brighter or darker. We can control that right with the shadow density. So if we turn it up, you can see now we have really dark shadows, and then the total opposite is true. If we turn it down, we have kind of much lighter shadows, give us kind of a more airy outdoor look. So you can control that. The shadow map resolution is interesting. This controls how sharp our shadows are. Because of the way that the Sky Dome is built, we basically have kind of two options. We have soft shadows and hard shadows, and this kind of controls it. So if we turn our shadow map resolution down, we're getting softer and softer and softer shadows. If we turn it up, you're going to see what happens. See the shadow getting tighter and tighter patterns, and let me just crank that all the way up to 1,000 and see how close we can get this. I'm not sure it's too dramatic right now, but you can see I'm going to turn up the shadow density, and I'm also going to kind of make the lighting a little bit more dramatic, just so we could see the shadowing going on. Okay, so you can see here sharper shadows, not super hard sharp, but that's what that is. And if we turn that all the way down, you can see really large shadow around the whole thing. So if you want to control the sharpness or the hardness of the shadow, you can crank that up, and you can crank that, just to kind of affect that what's going on. You can also adjust the light dome density if your shadows are kind of misbehaving on you. But remember, as you add more light dome density, you're adding more lights, so you do have to turn down your brightness quite a bit. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, this is looking pretty good, actually. Remember that adding more lights is always going to slow it down just a little bit, but it may give you a little bit cleaner kind of look and a little bit more definition in those shadows like we were talking about. So the last group of settings, I'm just going to turn those back down, the shadow density and the shadow map resolution, and readjust our brightness. Okay, just to get a quicker render going. Okay, that looks good. The last thing are the visibility extra options here. Obviously, the scene by camera, you could shut off the gradient. So now it still lights the scene identically, except for it doesn't show up in the render, like behind where it used to be blue, it's now black. The standard lights on and off. This is for traditionally for global illumination. If you want to use the SkyLight and all the gradients and everything in your global illumination, but you don't want it to actually light the scene normally, you could turn this on and off. And in fact, this light switch is a global light switch that turns off all of these switches all at once. So, and we'll talk about that more with global illumination. And the GI light on is the same thing. If you want to shut off the kind of how bright it is when you're using this rig in global illumination, if you want to shut that off, you could turn that off right here. So those are the settings for the SkyLight. Play around with it. It's a really flexible tool, especially if you don't have a floor plane. If you just have like a bunch of stuff kind of sitting out in space and you bring in that SkyLight, you get some really kind of pretty light rigs really quickly, especially at this highlight top section there. So play around with SkyLight. Thanks again for not only getting the training, but checking out or getting the rig, but also checking out the training. And if you're unclear of anything else in the section, I'm gonna have I have a tutorial for each of these. Please watch it. And again, I'm so glad you got it. I'll see you guys in another tutorial. Thanks, guys. Bye.